Welcome to ShiftWatch. I'm your host, Starbuck. In this episode, recently I found the Hidden History of Humanity project, and it was clearly information waiting for me to assimilate. If you're like me, it'll take some time for this narrative to find its way into your consciousness, but when it finally does, it resonates in a way that is unmistakable. I found references to the root races chronologically that included the Lemurian and Atlantean modes and shows where we are on our way to the sixth root races chronologically for humanity. We are almost there with the help of Earth's cosmically ordained rise in consciousness. Next, here's a wonderful illustration to help you comprehend the nature of Earth's tectonic plates and how they've been drastically altered over millennia. And Ben Davidson's science blitz ties together the solar phenomenon and its widespread effect on sentient Earth forms and the entire solar system as well. You would do well to pay attention to the recent cosmically historic storm he pointed out. Then you know how much I prefer talking with experiencers, and even I hadn't heard the actual account regarding Barney and Betty Hill. Here is a lost version of a 1991 interview with Betty Hill, who had a now familiar first contact in 1961. Betty invited contact, and she got it. And finally, Edgar Cayce predictions are once again circulating regarding religion, spirituality, and the year 2025.
The world is very ancient, and human origins are mysterious and obscure. We try to decipher our past based upon the multiple layers of civilizations whose ruins lay strewn across the planet like pieces of an archaic jigsaw puzzle. Some of these old civilizations are still buried beneath the deserts, mountains, and oceans, awaiting a time when they will yield their secrets through human discovery or natural cataclysms that will strip away and reveal their hidden locations. In the unique perspective on history that will be explored in this series, the case for a vaster chronological perspective of history will be investigated, based upon ancient sources hitherto unrecognized by the majority. With limited tools at the disposal of modern sciences, history has been abbreviated into a narrow band that does not sufficiently explain the vast time periods needed to evolve the human form and human consciousness. Deep in our racial memory or collective consciousness lurks the legends and myths of lands and continents that once existed, such as Lemuria and Atlantis. Fabulous stories abound of advanced cultures with their arts and technologies that have risen to great heights and then fallen back into the dust of history once again. Understanding these rhythms and cycles of time help us to understand that our modern civilizations are not the first to have emerged, nor are they necessarily more advanced than previous ones that have come and gone. This new approach to history challenges the way we think about the past based upon our cultural, religious, and educational conditioning. These structures have helped humanity thus far understand the world, but which in today's rapid acceleration of planetary consciousness are very limited and starting to break down. They are overdue for transformation into a broader, more inclusive vision. The possibility of discovering and understanding the origin of the human soul and its divine pedigree is imminent in our time. We stand before a doorway leading to planetary illumination upon the greatest mysteries of life, the hidden history of humanity.
The intention of the Hidden History of Humanity project is to re-establish the correct chronology and timelines for human history. That's part of it. The other part of it is that humanity is disempowered in not knowing its true origins or indeed the chronology. So to establish the correct chronology and the understanding of the root races, how humanity came into being, and how the evolution of consciousness proceeded from there, is going to empower humanity with knowing the truth. Humanity is having the truth hidden from it at this point in time, but it is actually emerging. We have light emerging, we have truth emerging, and this is happening exoterically in parallel with this esoteric emergence of the ageless wisdom teachings.
Part of the intention of the Hidden History of Humanity series is to present a chronological sequence of history that demonstrates the evolution of consciousness by humanity, the mystery of when the human soul came into existence and its purpose. This first series will establish a broad structure of understanding for the future series that will elaborate further. Evolution will be traced from before the human race appeared through the stages of the Lemurian, Atlantean, and current root races. It will finish with contemporary humanity that is now transitioning into the sixth root race. It will discuss the evolution that will unfold in the future, always in the context of what has transpired. It has been said that unless we understand our history, then we are condemned to repeat the mistakes of the past. On the scientific side, several key areas will be explored in this history of the root races, such as geology, geography, astronomy, archaeology, and anthropology. From the religious angle, some of the most ancient works will be referenced: the Hindu, Jewish, Persian, Islamic, Buddhist, Gnostic, Celtic, and Christian traditions. Investigating the hidden history of the world means that we must return to discover the birth of the solar system, of which our Earth is but one participant. Stupendous questions will be explored as to how this solar system came into existence, with its subsequent planetary schemes, chains, rounds, and globes.
Take a look at the outer surface of our planet. it may look like one solid shell. But according to the theory of plate tectonics, this outer layer, called the lithosphere, is actually broken up into massive, rigid slabs called tectonic plates that fit together like puzzle pieces, floating on a thick, molten layer of the mantle called the asthenosphere. The plates slide around like slow-motion bumper cars, traveling up to 6 inches a year. Right now, Earth's crust is divided into 7 large plates and dozens of smaller ones. The boundaries between these plates are dynamic and violent places that make and break Earth's crust. The relative movement of the plates creates 3 types of boundaries. A divergent boundary occurs when 2 plates move away from each other. On land, you can easily see this. Diverging plates create huge troughs, like the Great Rift Valley in Africa. If the spreading here continues, the Indian Ocean will eventually flood the rift, converting the entire eastern Horn of Africa into a massive island. Transform boundaries are where 2 plates grind past each other in opposite directions. The most famous example is the San Andreas Fault, where portions of Southern California, including Los Angeles, are sliding roughly 2 inches closer to Northern California each year. A convergent boundary, on the other hand, is where 2 plates collide. The impact often weakens and crumples the crust upward into jagged mountain ranges.
This is the Science Blitz. We're going to rapidly go over why there are more than 5,000 studies on how solar energetic particles impact the weather, earthquakes, and biology. Everything from temperature to rain to clouds to lightning to storms to earthquakes and volcanoes to heart attacks, mitochondrial function, and psychology. Today, we're going over a simple physics concept that will help you understand why the sun and solar activity has been tied to, well, almost everything. Most people think of light when they think about the sun, but it's the particles, the physical material energy that impacts weather, seismicity, and biology. This is because the particles are vastly more impactful than the light. If you can't picture that, picture a nuclear bomb. Split just one physical atom and look how much light is emitted. Particles are basically bound light compacted into them, and so the sun sends these particles to Earth during solar flares, coronal mass ejections, coronal hole streams, and high-energy proton events. While the majority of them are funneled to the polar region of the Earth, once they enter, triggering the aurora, equatorward traveling waves shoot that energy across the world in a matter of minutes. It's moving at the speed of electricity. But the impact of the solar storm also compacts the magnetic field, forcing Van Allen belt electrons down into the atmosphere to meet the aurorally driven waves. Beyond those, cosmic rays are hitting every inch of the atmosphere every second, and then they break out into particle cascades. Some of this energy does get down into the atmosphere, but the majority is concentrated in the ionosphere at the top of the sky. That also happens to be the ceiling of the global electric circuit, which conducts current up and down through every part of the world, every pressure cell. And as this current is impacted by the solar energy dumped into the ionosphere, it interacts with every speck of the atmosphere, the crust, and everything in between, which includes us. Because we know exactly how much of this energy is traveling through different rocks, how it seeks out the cracks, like fault lines, we can consider the items in the ground. Not only is there a phenomenal amount of iron and other conductive metal in the crust, which can obviously be impacted by these electric particles and currents, but there is a tremendous amount of water as well. Water reacts very attractively towards electricity. Here are several examples of electric current pulling water around, just some simple green dye so you can see it better. It also doesn't just work side to side, but up and down. Electric current can force water to defy gravity and push upward on rocks. Is anyone thinking about megathrust earthquakes right now? You can actually try this at home. Get a plastic spoon, rub it on your hair to build up static electricity. You will be able to bend water coming out of the faucet, like this. Now, the most abundant material beneath our feet is actually a crystal called olivine, and it is piezoelectric and electrokinetic. Charging up here with low electric field dark mode current and using a grounding rod, look at how they translocate, self-displacing upon discharging of the electric energy. Now, the water in the atmosphere is no less vulnerable, and frankly, so are the diatomic elements like oxygen and nitrogen. Dust as well, plenty of that in the atmosphere, and just think about electrostatic Swiffer dusters. No surprise that these particles and currents impact weather, just like they can the earthquakes, and of course, our bodies are no different. Iron and hemoglobin, 66% water by weight, ion channels mediating everything and every function, electrolytes, they call them that for a reason, mitochondrial energy factories in every cell, and of course, neurons in the brain. The solar particles, the cosmic rays, the Van Allen electrons, and the magnetic field fluctuations during solar storms. They all impact the ionosphere, the global electric circuit, and induced electric currents and fields. This is why there are thousands of studies tying solar particle and magnetic energy to weather events, earthquakes, and biological events, physical and mental. Good evening, folks. The minor proton storm this week will not go down in any record books. It didn't reach anywhere near scary levels, and I doubt anyone will even publish on the event. But I won't forget it for how unexpected it was. To understand why, we need to understand how these high-energy proton storms move in the solar system. They don't move in a straight line away from the sun, but on a curve. These curves, the interplanetary magnetic field you see on the Enlil spiral. These gigantic solar fields thread the solar system, and when a big solar eruption hits one, the protons can get hyper-zoomed to near the speed of light. While a coronal mass ejection can take 2 or 3 days to arrive at Earth, these protons can arrive just minutes after a flare, surging through these flux tubes. Now, for that reason, sometimes a direct blast at Earth can send them here, but often they take the curve. One can arrive at Earth from the leading side or turning away from the Earth, even the exact opposite side of the sun from the Earth. Now let's take a peek at what the coronal mass ejection trajectory looks like versus a proton storm. The shock wave of the dense CME goes straight out, but the particles follow the field curvature. Because of that, we have a danger zone for high-energy proton storms and a safe zone. But like so many things in science, it just doesn't always work out that way. First, if we can take the Enlil spiral here and set it up the same on a separate graphic, sun on the left, little Earth to the right, the red part of the circle is the danger zone. It extends from approximately Earth-facing position to far onto the backside of the sun. The danger wanes as you approach the incoming limb, which is the bottom of the screen here, and when we look at the sun, that would be on the left side. Alas, what caused this proton storm this week? Big blasts from that exact location. Several, actually. All from the green zone. There were about 3 significant solar eruptions that worked the proton flux slowly upwards earlier this week. So now, let's see that on our little graphic. We'll put a star where the blasts occurred. Now, true enough, this is not the first ever time this has happened, but it is unusual. And the only other times it did happen, the eruptions from the green zone were at least 100 times bigger than the ones this week. To give you a comparison, this is like a pitcher throwing a perfect game, or if you could call out the prom queen when the kids are in kindergarten. The fact is that 99% of the time these storms originate from the danger zone, in red. But this one will stick in my head for not only the unusual genesis point in the green zone, but how the eruptions weren't so titanic that an explanation is readily available. I'll see you in the morning for the Daily Show. Be safe, everyone.
We're talking with Betty Hill, famous and first abductee. September 19, 1961, Betty, while driving with her husband Barney, was heading south from Canada.
Right.
When very early in the morning, he saw a strange light behind the car. It was September 19th. But what time was that, Betty, that this light behind the car appeared?
Well, we would crossed over the border into New Hampshire, and I think we started to see this light following. Actually, in the very beginning, I noticed a bright light in the sky, and I thought I was discovering a new planet until it started to move. And this was about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. So we stopped the car and got out to see what this we thought it was a plane. So we stopped the car to get out to look at it. And that's when it changed direction and started coming in towards us. Now that was in about the Lancaster area.
So,
And then it followed us for about 30 miles. Paced our car.
and all the while you and Barney were discussing it. What is this? What is that?
Yeah, see, Barney'd been in World War II. He knew planes. And he's trying to identify this. And it's flying in a very erratic manner, which was very puzzling to us. But this is 61. We'd heard UFO. Well, actually, in those days, they called them flying saucers. We had no idea what a flying saucer looked like. But we had no fear, just curiosity. We were trying to identify this craft.
You go on in the road. You decide to pull over. Barney gets out of the car.
Actually, that was in the Indian Head area.
Okay. Am I preceding something here when you encountered alien entities, or was this after?
No, this is the next step.
Okay.
In the Indian Head area, I'm trying to attract the attention of this craft. I'm telling it, come on in. Hi. I got the window down. I'm yelling to it. Hi. Who are you? My cat fell off the stove. And at that point, it left the top of the mountain, came out over the highway, and stopped in midair directly in front of us, maybe about 50 feet in the sky. So Barney got out with the binoculars in an attempt to identify the craft. And when he looked up, he saw a circular window with a bright light behind it, and he saw these men standing behind the window looking down at him. And at that point, the craft began to descend, and he became frightened. Ran back to the car saying he thought they were trying to capture him. So we got in the car and we went speeding down the highway to avoid capture. And as we're driving along, there's beeping sounds. That sounds like something was hitting the trunk of the car, and the car vibrated. And then we drove along for about another 30 miles when Barney turned off onto a side road. And here were the group of men he'd seen on the craft standing in the middle of this road, blocking our way. And naturally, he had to stop the car. And they came up in two groups, took us out of the car, passed in the woods to where the craft was on the ground.
At that point, strange thoughts started going through your head, thoughts that weren't your own. Did you have some sort of telepathic communication with these entities, or?
All our communication was verbal.
Verbal?
Right.
Oh, interesting.
Yep. They spoke English in a limited way.
Huh.
Like, a foreigner coming here and not too well acquainted with our language. Well, in the very first part, they had us under some kind of control. And I brought myself out of this, but Barney was only able to bring himself out, partly out of it. So that I was just as conscious as I am right now.
They walk you into the craft up a ramp. That landed craft. This is right off Route 3. Well, actually, you didn't know where you were at that point.
Yeah.
But
it was right off from Route 3.
So they walk you up this ramp. You're brought in, and what did they say they were going to do with you?
Well, when we got up to the door, I was not going to go in. So I socked him.
You punched the entity.
Yeah. In fact, I put up such a battle that my dress is badly torn. And he said, come on. All we want to do is some simple tests. And as soon as the tests are over, we'll take you back to your car and you'll be on your way.
Let's just go back to those type of entities. They were your classic alien, gray-shaped, cat-like. No, they weren't. Okay.
They were a form of human being.
They were a form of human being.
Right.
Did they have cat-like or Cheshire-like eyes?
They had larger eyes than ours, smaller nose, and smaller mouth. No protruding part of the ear and no hair. But they're people.
Nothing like these classic grays you see your Whitley Street.
I don't know. I've never seen those. I don't know what they're talking about.
Sure, okay. There was a leader.
We gave them different names to identify him. Now, I don't know if he was the leader or the interpreter, but we called him the leader. And then there was the one who did the testing. We called him the examiner. There were 9 others who stayed out in the corridor, and we called them the crew members.
Okay. So you're on board. What do you remember what you saw when you entered the craft? Did something must have taken you aback, saying this is amazing, or what type of craft am I inside? Can you describe as to what you collectively remember?
Went in to a corridor, and then I was taken into a room, and I had to step up because the level of the floor was above the corridor, and it was an oval-shaped door like we would see on a ship.
Do you remember at that point, did they specify what their agenda at that point was? Were you going immediately in for the examination, or?
They had taken us strictly to actually, they wanted to find out how we were like them or different from them physically.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Did you feel that you were chosen for this, or you happened to be in the wrong area at the wrong time, or the right area at the right time?
Well, now I figure it was the right time in the right area. But I think I brought it on myself. You know, I'm waving to them and yelling to them, and hey, who are you? And
You get into the examination room. You're separated from Barney.
Right, he's taken into the second room.
Your examination, and again, all this comes out in later dreams and hypnosis, but immediately do they remove your clothes and perform? What happens? You'll have to. I'm tainted by all the popular lore of abduction stories.
Well, see, I don't know anything about those stories.
That's good. Well, you're better off.
But I was taken into this first room, and it was quite bare. There was a small table, there was a stool, and then the wall, there were doors in the wall that would slide back and forth. And they put me on a stool, checked my eyes, ears, nose, throat, my feet, my hands. And then he put me on a table and said they were going to check my nervous system. And they used some kind of equipment to do this. And then he tried to insert a needle-like instrument in my navel, which caused pain. So they stopped doing it. And then the examiner left and went into the room where Barney was.
Mm-hmm. Can you describe what was happening to Barney, what Barney recalled under hypnosis? What was going on at the same time in his examination room?
With Barney, most of the exam was the same as mine, except they were interested in his bone structure. I mean, they were feeling all up and down his spine, his arms and all, basically.
Did Barney recall any struggle akin to the struggle that you had, where you had a torn?
No, because they had him under this control, and he wasn't. Was very upsetting to him because he couldn't move.
Mm-hmm. Your examination concludes. Then what happens?
Well, while the examiner is in doing Barney's exam, I started talking with the leader. And I said, I know you're not from this planet. Where are you from? And he showed me a star map. And he explained part of the map to me briefly. And then we just talked about food and different aspects of life here. You know.
And what? Give me some.
Actually, what led to the food was the examiner came running back into the room where I was and started tugging at my teeth. And he wanted to know why Barney's teeth were removable and mine were not.
And the story is Barney had dentures.
Yeah, during World War II, Barney got too close to a hand grenade and knocked his teeth out.
And they were totally confused by
that.
All
was very
this.
puzzling to them. Well, they were sort of disappointed. I didn't know anything about the solar system.
Okay.
That I think they really expected me to be able to identify the map.
They were actually upset that you didn't recognize their home.
Dr. Simon at the time.
Benjamin Simon.
Dr. Benjamin Simon said that during the week, if I wanted to, I would be able to remember the star map, and I would sketch it. But I was not to think about it. I was just to let my hands go ahead and draw it, which I did. And that was in 1965.
4 years after the incident.
Now, in 1969, Marjorie Fish came here and stayed a few days. And asked me all kinds of questions, hours and hours, which he taped. And then used that to go back home and
Took
did
your
the
map.
research on it, and identified the areas.
The area of the star map, which she said was in the constellation that we know, Reticulus, in the star system, was Zeta
Reticuli, yep.
And from that point, do you remember them mentioning Zeta Reticuli, or is that a terminology that we as
That's
Earthlings
our
have given them?
name.
So,
I would have no idea
re-
what their name
Okay.
is for their home planet.
What you're about to discover about the prophesied spiritual transition could illuminate your role in this unprecedented transformation of human consciousness. Edgar Cayce, conducting his remarkable spiritual work from Virginia Beach, Virginia, entered over 14,000 documented trance states throughout his extraordinary lifetime. Through these deep spiritual communications, preserved by the Association for Research and Enlightenment, he revealed profound insights about the evolution of human consciousness and the inevitable transformation of how humanity approaches spiritual truth and divine connection. In reading 3976-15, one of his most significant prophecies about religious evolution, Cayce described a vision of what he called the spiritual renaissance, a period when humanity would rediscover the original spiritual truths that formed the foundation of all great religions before they became institutionalized and often corrupted by human interpretation and organizational control. This spiritual renaissance, according to Cayce's mystical teachings, would emerge naturally as human consciousness evolves beyond the need for external spiritual authorities and develops the capacity for direct divine experience that makes institutional mediation unnecessary for authentic spiritual development. The prophecy reveals that this transition would occur through what Cayce termed spontaneous spiritual awakening waves, periods when large numbers of people simultaneously experience direct divine connection that demonstrates the accessibility of spiritual truth without requiring traditional religious frameworks or institutional approval. These awakening waves, Cayce explained, would create what he called the critical mass effect, a point where enough individuals have discovered direct spiritual access that the collective consciousness naturally shifts away from dependence on external religious authorities toward recognition of the divine presence that exists within every sincere seeker. According to Cayce's prophetic vision, this transition would unfold through several distinct phases, each representing a deeper level of human spiritual evolution and a further movement away from institutional spiritual dependence toward authentic personal divine experience. The first phase involves what he termed institutional disillusionment acceleration, a period when increasing numbers of people would become dissatisfied with religious institutions that emphasize external compliance over internal spiritual transformation, leading to widespread exodus from traditional religious organizations. This disillusionment, Cayce revealed, would not arise from hostility toward spiritual truth, but from sincere spiritual hunger that recognizes the difference between authentic divine experience and religious activities that substitute institutional loyalty for genuine spiritual growth. The institutional disillusionment phase explains the current widespread departure from organized religion among spiritually sincere individuals who find that traditional religious practices often feel empty, limiting, or disconnected from the living spiritual reality they seek to experience. The second phase encompasses what Cayce called direct experience emergence, a period when individuals who have left traditional religious structures begin discovering their innate capacity for direct divine communion through meditation, prayer, spiritual service, and other practices that provide immediate access to divine guidance and healing. This direct experience emergence demonstrates that spiritual connection is not dependent on religious institutions, ordained authorities, or traditional rituals, but rather represents the natural capacity of consciousness to commune with its divine source when freed from limiting beliefs and external restrictions. The proliferation of meditation practices, energy healing, spiritual retreats, and personal spiritual development approaches represents the early manifestation of this direct experience emergence that Cayce prophesied would replace institutional spirituality. The third phase involves what he described as universal truth recognition, a process where individuals practicing direct spiritual connection begin recognizing the common divine truths that underlie all authentic spiritual traditions, leading to the emergence of what Cayce called universal spirituality that honors all paths while being limited by none. This universal truth recognition creates spiritual communities and practices that draw wisdom from multiple traditions while maintaining focus on direct divine experience rather than adherence to particular doctrinal systems or institutional authorities. The growing popularity of interfaith spiritual communities, universal meditation practices, and spiritual teachings that integrate wisdom from multiple traditions represents the early emergence of this universal spirituality that transcends traditional religious boundaries. The fourth phase encompasses what Cayce termed service-based spirituality manifestation, the development of spiritual communities and practices organized around serving the healing and elevation of consciousness rather than maintaining institutional structures or enforcing religious conformity. This service-based spirituality focuses on practical applications of spiritual wisdom for healing, creativity, environmental stewardship, social justice, and other expressions of divine love in action, rather than emphasizing religious rituals, theological study, or institutional loyalty. But perhaps most significantly, Cayce prophesied the emergence of what he called the religion of love in action, a spiritual approach that measures authenticity not by doctrinal correctness or institutional affiliation, but by the practical demonstration of divine love, wisdom, and service in daily life and relationships. This religion of love in action represents the ultimate evolution of human spirituality, where spiritual development is measured by increased capacity for loving service rather than religious knowledge, institutional position, or adherence to particular beliefs or practices. The prophecy reveals that this new spirituality would naturally incorporate the most effective spiritual practices and wisdom teachings from all authentic traditions, while discarding the institutional structures, competitive dynamics, and doctrinal limitations that have often prevented traditional religions from serving their highest spiritual purposes. Cayce also revealed that the transition to new spirituality would be accompanied by what he called spiritual gift democratization, a period when healing abilities, prophetic insights, and other spiritual gifts traditionally associated with religious elites would become widely available among ordinary individuals practicing direct divine connection. This democratization would demonstrate that spiritual gifts are natural expressions of developed consciousness rather than special privileges granted by religious institutions, further reducing dependence on traditional religious authorities and structures.